jeez. If I had any After Effects skills at all, that would have been really cool. Could have added some magic stuff there, but no, that didn't happen. So welcome back to another one of these videos. Still not sure what to call it. I'm thinking about like lessons from movies, or if that sounds too generic, I don't know, maybe like cinematic lessons or cinema study, or that's generic too. I don't know, what should we call this series? Comment below, let me know. Tell me all about it. What should we call this series? What are some cool names for me talking about film theory that's not already taken? Also, skipping the intro again, that's just gonna be the style of this series. It's kind of like how the last rant of the Kumquat video, there were those black bars, and now I have to pretend like that was intentional, and I'm gonna put it in the next video even though that was a total accident. But hey, you didn't hear that from me. Totally on purpose. Don't tell the noobs. This is our little secret. Anyway, let's talk about Doctor Strange. It was pretty cool. I'd argue it was actually better than Civil War. I'm serious, I think it was the best Marvel movie to come out this year. And it's really funny how I was talking about like the visual aspect of Rogue One last week, and now coming to a movie that I was raving about, oh man, that looks so cool. Now I'm gonna talk about the story. We're going all over the place. We're talking about everything. There's a lot of stuff to talk about in film. This is very much in the same vein as my Death of the Author, Why Christian Movies Suck video. I really feel like there's some good-hearted people out there that want to combine their passion for movie making and their love of Jesus and kind of meet in the middle and also, I don't know, evangelize in some way. But it hasn't worked out. It's turned out some pretty bad movies. Or so we thought. Upon further review, upon thinking and looking at some of the central themes of Doctor Strange and reading into some interviews with the director, I have this question for you. Is Doctor Strange a Christian movie? Well, obviously not in the traditional sense. I'm not saying that this is gonna try and get butts in church seats next week. It's not directly preaching to the audience, but maybe that's the point. I came across an article from Relevant Magazine, the website. I don't order the magazine. Who reads magazines anymore? With Scott Derrickson, who is the director of Doctor Strange, also went to school at Biola and USC. Fight on, man. Fight on. And I really recommend checking out the whole thing. It's too long. I'm not going to read the whole thing or even get to summarizing every single point made, but Scott Derrickson had some really cool points about his philosophy on filmmaking and what he enjoys adding into his films and all that. It's definitely worth your time. Check it out. This was just something that I kind of wanted to talk about, is how we were able to subtly infuse some of these themes and some of these ideas that are very Christian in nature into a mainstream comic book movie without it feeling forced, or without it feeling like it's trying to preach to you or force stuff down your throat. And I know this is a very niche audience that I'm talking to right now. I don't want to my non-religious viewers out there, I'm sorry if this is kind of pushing you out. I don't want to push you out. I want to have this conversation. You're welcome in this conversation. I just want to specifically make this point about filmmakers who happen to be Christian and happen to want to have that spiritual aspect in their work without it being kind of forced. I think I'm one of those people. I want to make good stories and I want to honor God with it, but at the same time, I don't want to make God's Not Dead 2 or Kirk Cameron Saves Christmas or really anything else Kevin has reviewed. But reading through what Scott Derrickson has to say about it, I think there's a lot of cool tips on how we can find the happy medium. Tip number one to making good Christian movies: don't make Christian movies. This seems a little weird, but in the way he was talking about it, there was never a point in his conversation or in his thinking where he was like, oh yeah, so this is the message we've got to teach in this movie. It's pretty much always been, here's a cool concept, here's something we can play around with. You know, like director terms, like movie making terms. Step one, make a movie. Make a movie, and if Jesus is such a central part of who you are and with how you live your life, it will naturally come into how you view characters and how you view certain perspectives, kind of the philosophy that you kind of feel when looking at certain things. I think there are a lot of connections between Doctor Strange and kind of the Christian walk and all of that. Scott Derrickson himself described Doctor Strange's story arc in this movie as someone overcoming themselves, as someone kind of shedding their own arrogance and their self-importance, and ultimately coming to the conclusion that the Ancient One gives him near the beginning of the third act / more towards the end of the movie, which is, life isn't about you. It doesn't explicitly say, alright, now let's turn to Jesus, now here's the altar call. It uses the ideas of spirituality and of science, and if there is more to life than spiritual matter, then naturalism and saying only what I can physically touch and feel and look at is all that exists, then limiting yourself to that way is not science. Doctor Strange goes from seeing the world through a keyhole to recognizing that there's more to life, that there's more out there. I think that is a message that people will take infinitely more to heart than just blatantly, here is a sermon. You don't want to create converts with your movie. You want to create conversations. I know, I want to punch me too. That was the worst. But seriously, I think it's good to play with these sorts of themes. I think bringing spirituality into films in general is a great way to have a conversation starter. In the article, Scott Derrickson talks about how he was drawn to horror movies and to how that's the one genre that seems to be the most open to talking about spiritual things. Obviously in a negative way, like he did The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Sinister and Deliver Us from Evil, and these movies that are very kind of demon-centric, like focusing on these evil entities that we can't quite explain the origin of and all the things that go bump in the night. And yet at the same time, these are the sorts of topics and areas of storytelling that we kind of shy away from to the detriment of storytelling from a Christian perspective, because these are the genres, as Scott Derrickson says, that are most open to talking about spirituality and all that. Like that's such a cool point, because when I look back I think about like how many people were just absolutely just attacking Harry Potter, and when it was brought up that hey, there's some Christian themes in Doctor Strange, they said no, that's not okay, because there's also Eastern religions in here, there's also sorcery, and that's clearly wrong. I think it's time to stop looking so much at kind of the base level aspect of movies. Like C.S. Lewis is a great, he had magic in his stories. C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, they all had magic, they had sorcerers in their stories, but it wasn't pitching paganism, it wasn't pitching those sorts of things. In fact, I don't even think they were really pitching Christianity. I know C.S. Lewis, it's more on the nose, like this is the Bible, but like, I think they were both just trying to tell really good stories, and that's what we should do. Start with, here is a good story I want to tell, and then along the line you say, oh, here's a cool theme I want to talk about, I want to explore in this area. I think people with agendas go into stories too rigidly. Kind of a really cool point that you actually find from the movie is when the Ancient One is teaching Doctor Strange about how to use magic and how you can't beat a river into submission. You have to kind of go with the flow on certain things, show some assertion in certain areas, but at the same time, don't rigidly say, this must go in this direction. What makes some of the stuff in Doctor Strange feel so natural is that there's a good implementation of science and spiritualism, and you feel like this is how the characters would interact, and this is how that person would say, no, I believe in this. I don't buy into spiritualism, I am completely naturalist, and this person would also say this and counter with this. And the same way that certain Eastern philosophies believe into this perfectly ties into an aspect of Christianity, and you can really tie it together and kind of introduce people to these cool concepts and get them thinking about things. And like I was saying in my Death of the Author video, it's not forced on you, it's in the background. It's there for people to see, but it's not so in your face to where that's the first thing you think of when you get out of the movie theater and you're like, wow, that was really forced on me. But it sticks with you long term. These sorts of themes and these discussions, they stick with you as you think of a movie more, as you unravel it, as you unpack it. You've noticed these things more on second viewings and third viewings. And some people won't notice it at all. Some people will be completely oblivious. For some people, this is the first time, this video might be the first time they're like, oh yeah, there was something like that in Doctor Strange, I guess. I don't know. And that's perfectly fine. Again, Death of the Author. It's important that once you put a work out there, it's out there. It is the world's now. Make sure that it works as a movie, and again, Doctor Strange wasn't perfect. There's that one, like, I don't kill people thing that came out of nowhere and then never showed up again. But make sure it works as best as you can make it work as a movie, and then all the cool other stuff that came into the movie when you poured your heart and soul and all your effort into this. It will be there. Don't beat a river into submission. Go with the flow, but assert yourself in certain areas. So for movies that are made by Pure Flix, where they're low budget movies, and their angle is this is a Christian movie made by Christians, by a Christian company, come bring people from your church, let's sell out theaters. Even you guys can learn something from this, and that is stop making Christian movies. Make movies. Have Christians, have people who genuinely have a passion for their art and have this desire to make cool stuff. Go out there and make movies. And if they love Jesus and they love spreading his word and they love the philosophies of Christianity, they love tying things together and getting people to think in new ways, that will attract people. At the end of the day, Doctor Strange is a Marvel movie that made millions of dollars. People came and they saw it. At the end of the day, the secular people of the world just want to see a cool movie. And if you can give them that cool movie and also a little food for thought, and it can lead to cool discussions and cool moments afterwards, it can open up people to talking about spirituality, or it can help you to understand other people's perspectives on spirituality and Christianity and naturalism and science. I genuinely believe conversion is a supernatural thing. I think God is the only being that can take people and convince them that he is with them and he is there and he is all powerful. I don't think a movie can do that. I think movies can do a ton of great things. I don't think it can do that. I don't think it should do that. I think at most it should be a conversation starter. And even beyond that, it should just be a cool movie that will have people coming back to other cool movies where you can also bring up bigger and better topics. And also, don't shy away from certain topics. I can't remember where the video went because it was a really cool sermon. The video got pulled offline, so I would link it if I could find it. But it was just this guy talking about how back when the church was just such a part of the Renaissance and how big members of the church funded paintings and they funded these great artists. They were patrons for all this culture. That's how they drove the culture so much. That's why the painting of the Sistine Chapel and David were just such huge staples of the Renaissance. Because the church was involved in this art. They weren't nitpicking, they weren't saying, okay, this must be like this must fit into our perspective of Christianity, this must be safe enough for the conservative crowd to not be offended by it, or for the liberal crowd to be offended, I guess, I don't know. It has to be just bland enough for everyone to like it. Sponsoring a guy to make a giant carving of a naked guy is not playing it safe. Alright? The ultimate message of what that guy was trying to get across was the church's role and Christians' role should be to get involved in art, not to censor art, or try to create subpar art and say, this is what you must like. Get involved in horror movies. Go towards subjects that are considered taboo and like we shouldn't bring them up and mention them, and bring your perspective on them. Do it well. I mean, that's a given. Do it well. But at the same time, go for it. Stop making Christian movies and start making movies with your Christian eyes and your Christian hands and your Christian perspective. Make good movies. That's what we should be doing. Don't make Christian movies, make Doctor Strange. Well, don't literally make somebody's already making a ripoff, aren't they? That's my conclusion today. Look for opportunities to make movies like Doctor Strange where we can talk about the spiritual and we can talk about difficult topics. And answers are not directly given to people. I don't want to say never. I'm not omnipotent or omnipresent, but I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say something here. I don't think anyone has ever been converted by watching a movie. And if they have, I gotta wonder what their faith was like anyway. If the only thing going on in their life is, oh man, I saw this movie, now I'm gonna change my entire worldview. I don't think that's healthy. Create discussions. Creates those sorts of things. I think there will always be people in the anti-Harry Potter crowd, the anti-horror movie crowd, the anti-putting weird symbolism and imagery in things. There will always be the vigilant Christian who is like, oh man, Spider-Man is part of the Illuminati because this symbol means go Satan. Or whatever. We don't make movies for those people. We make movies for all of you, for all the other people. We, as if I'm part of the people making $1 million blockbusters. It's a little ambitious. We'll see. Maybe someday. We'll see. But anyway, what are you guys' thoughts on this? What's your thought on philosophy and religion being presented in movies in tasteful ways? What are your thoughts on Doctor Strange and all the ideas that were presented there and all the metaphors and the characters that are presented? Do you have alternate ideas on what Doctor Strange is about? I don't know. What's your least favorite example of kind of a message of a story taking over a movie? I know we've all been talking about Christian movies and that's shooting fish in a barrel, but I will say I think the invention of lying was a pretty cool concept until they just became a vehicle for bashing religion and just talking about, oh man, came up with the man in the sky because we can't deal with death and all those other cliches. Also, that weird episode episode of Family Guy where they brought up like a spiritual discussion and it immediately got resolved in the stupidest way possible, conveniently in the way that Seth MacFarlane sees the world. Like, yeah, great. Anyway, all that aside, looking forward to your comments down below. And as always, until next time, God bless and stay saucy.